Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that we all face and that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. All right, so I have really been excited, looking forward to today's podcast. Me and the guest today have kind of been going back and forth, and I've tried to get him here, and we've missed paths a couple times, but he's finally here. So let me introduce you to today's guest, and you guys, I think, will have as much fun listening to this as I'm going to have interviewing this particular episode. So today we've got Jay Austin joining our podcast. Jay brings over 3 decades of ministry experience in a variety of roles, including a discipleship ministry, lead teaching pastor, and an executive pastor, and he now serves as the Family Discipleship Minister at Harpeth Christian Church in Franklin, Tennessee. He holds a BS in psychology and a master's in Christian education and an honorary doctorate of divinity. He's a certified child, youth, parent, and family life coach, and is the author of Your Child's Journey, this book right here, which we're going to be talking about some today, which was published in 2019. He's been married to Melissa for 29 years, and he has 2 boys, Isaiah, 23, Joshua, 21. Jay, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. It's great to be here. I love coming over to Chattanooga.
Well, great. So we were talking a little bit prior to the show. You obviously, I like outdoors and camping. You stayed over at Mont Eagle, coming this way this weekend to be here. Enjoyed some of God's beauty, the nature, and 29 years. I'm coming up on 29 years in July. So
That's
we've
crazy.
been married about congratulations.
Well, thank you. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Actually, we got engaged on Mont Eagle Mountain underneath the cross. So
No
there's a
kidding.
whole story to that, but love this area. It's very deep in our hearts.
Okay, great. Well, again, glad to have you here today. And we're going to talk primarily about your book that you've written. I have read it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And if you, those that are listening, listen, I would right now put your podcast on pause. Go look this up. Your Child's Journey. It's a guide to intentional parenting from birth to adulthood. If you are a parent, especially, this book's got to be in your library. It's just it's a no-brainer. Once I read it, I was like, oh wow, I wish somebody would have put this in my hands before I had kids.
Yeah, well, thanks.
So and those of you that are thinking about starting a family, you're going out, you're getting diapers, you're building the crib, you're putting your nursery together. This needs to be, along with all the baby names, because I remember as a parent, I went through all the baby name books, and me and my wife sitting down and looking at it. Seriously, this needs to be part of the library. So that's why I'm excited to talk to you today. We're going to talk about this book specifically. So let's just jump into it. What's the book about, and why did you write it?
Yeah, so the book is about having a plan and knowing kind of where you're going to take your kids and want to take them as you're helping them trust and follow Jesus for their entire childhood into their young adulthood and hopefully through college or career as they get started. Where did it come from? To be honest with you, my wife and I, when we had our children at age 5 and 7, looked at each other and said, what in the world are we going to do?
Yeah.
And so we started putting together a plan. At first it was to age 18, and then it was to let's run it out to 21, get them through college, and then it was kind of like, okay, wait, let's get them to 24.
Okay.
Because 24 is a significant time as the brain is starting to understand the workings of the executive processing and emotions. And so let's just have a plan that even when we get off track, we'll have something to come back to and know that we're going to do to make sure that our kids know that we want them to trust and follow Jesus. Ultimately, it's a relationship between them and the Lord. And so we just wanted to do all that we could. And so I'm a development guy, and we sat down and wrote up a plan, and that's what the book became.
Okay. Yeah. So was this like intuitive knowledge? Or was it just like, this is the stuff that makes sense? Or, like you had this as part of your toolkit as before parenting? I mean, how did you come up with this stuff?
Yeah, I think it's probably 2 or 3 things. One is To be honest, I had a great father, and I had a great mother who loved the Lord, and they didn't have a plan, but they did an awful good job of just constantly pointing me back to Jesus.
You won the parent lottery.
I did.
Yeah.
And my wife did not. And so we have contrasting stories, and so that really came to the table and really helped us in developing some of the things that we've done and how we help other parents. The other thing is my background is in psychology, and so I am development at root of saying, what are the foundational elements that cause something to be successful in the future?
Sure.
And so we started putting that thought process into place. And then even looking back on our own lives and saying, what are the areas that most of our friends got off track in their relationship with the Lord, and putting together milestones that actually said we're going to intentionally help our kids not get off track at that time.
Yeah.
So that's what the milestones of the book represent.
Awesome. And you were going to probably you said that word intentional. We're probably going to circle back to that here in a little bit, also, because I know that's a huge part in any plan. You've got to be intentional, right? So, all right. So, I want to jump into the book and just work our way through the main elements of it. And so the first thing here that pops up is the 3 false beliefs that most parents have when they have kids. There's 3 misconceptions or whatever you want to call them. So number 1, my child needs to decide what he or she is going to believe on their own. Number 2, my child must be my friend and like me. And number 3, I am in control of my child and will protect him or her from the world. So let's go back. Let's look at that first one and have you just sort of explain what exactly that means. My child needs to decide what he or she is going to believe on their own. What in the world does that mean?
Yeah, so in our culture, people say don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics. It's just kind of it's a cliche statement. Our world right now is set up to out-disciple the church. They're going to be discipled into something. Children will be discipled into something.
Yeah.
And there is a scope and sequence that is set out with most school systems and most cultures to get your child to think and act and do a certain thing.
Yeah.
We haven't been intentional in that in the church as much as we should be. And so circling back and understanding that we can't leave things on the table with our children and just expect them to work out. Yeah. We intentionally teach them how to drive. We intentionally teach them how to clean up their rooms. And so we teach all of these things. And in our culture, many parents are afraid that if they push their children too hard or put their faith or no faith on their child, that in some way they're doing their child harm. And what I have found is that when you understand what God has established and you teach that well to your children, they feel more secure and hopeful, and their desire to trust and follow Jesus goes up significantly. Yeah. Not because they just stumbled on it, but because you intentionally shared with them what was important, what the truth was.
So, really it's grounded in Scripture. You bring up your child in the way of the Lord, and they will not depart from you. Right. So it's I think a counterbalance or maybe even building a defense system for your kid, because you hit on a main thing there, which is they're going to get indoctrinated. And I don't mean that, indoctrination doesn't necessarily have to be a bad word.
Correct.
But they're going to get indoctrinated into something, school, wherever they are, they're going to have a belief system put on them. And if mom and dad aren't giving them the things that are important at the home, they don't have really any foundational points to stand on when they do get faced with other belief systems. Is that maybe an accurate thing to say?
That's accurate. What I would go a step further in that and say is that God has this incredible, beautiful plan for your child. And if we don't help them know God's plan, they'll find the devil's ugly plan for their life.
Yeah, that's a good way.
And so I love that term, God's beautiful plan. Yeah. And it's a way of really looking into the Scriptures and finding out how God made us, why He made us, what's the relationship look like, and what is it that you as a parent need to share with your child that helps them identify who God made them to be rather than maybe how they feel about things or what the world's telling them to think about things.
Right. And that's part of our responsibility as parents, I think, is to do that, help our kids identify that.
Absolutely. Parents are the thing that shape the child.
Yeah.
From the very few days that a child is born, they begin to connect deeply with the one that is holding them.
Right.
Typically, that is a mother. There is a nurturing that comes, and that love and protection that happens between birth and age 3 determines how they're going to relate to their spouse when they're 27, 28, 29, when they get married.
Yeah.
And so we can't underestimate the impact that parents have through each phase of a child's development.
Right. I don't think a lot of parents realize that,
It's
the
amazing.
impact that they actually do have, which is kind of scary when you stop and think about it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a huge responsibility, right?
Yeah.
All right, so point number 2, my child must be my friend and like me.
Yeah. So, I mean, that one's pretty self-explanatory. When parents are asked what do they want for their child, they say, I want my child to be happy. And so many times that means, especially when we're living in a culture where there are a lot of single parents, they're always trying to keep the harmony within the relationship.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they find it difficult to put boundaries in place that are healthy for a child.
Yeah, right.
And in that, it's not unusual for a child at all at age 11 to look at their parent and say, I don't like you.
Right.
And a lot of them say a lot worse than that.
Sure.
I was making it PG
Yeah.
for the broadcast. And parents get really sideways about that.
Yeah.
What the child is saying is, I'm testing you right now to see if your belief systems are worth sticking to.
Yeah.
And so that's actually a positive thing sometimes when they don't like you, because it means that they've got good grounding and foundation, that they're feeling secure, and that when those tests come, that they can lean on the fact that you will stand for what is right and what is true.
You know, it's hard, though, to be a parent and not want your kids to like you, right? I mean, it's because it's conflict.
Right.
You know, and as you know, going through that as a parent with, you know, my kids are grown now, but I vividly remember, you know, the conflict that arose in my house when my wife and I had laid down some foundational principles that our kids, they didn't agree with those principles. You know, they wanted to, because it wasn't fun or whatever, you know.
Right.
And so it creates conflict. It brings conflict into the household. And the easy thing to do would have just been to say, okay, you know, I love you so much and I want you to be happy, right? So, you know, we don't have that conflict. But, you know, doing the opposite of that, that's the hard work as a parent.
Right. It is the hard work. And I think one of the things, and I'll talk about this either next or later on, is the role of the parent not as the authoritative, but as an authoritarian, which means I'm not going to control every conversation without you having any say or emotion or understanding your part in the conversation.
Right.
And so it is in those times that we're laying down, this is what's best for us, this is what's best for you, these are our boundaries, whether that's around technology. I mean, there's just so many different areas. Yeah. But inviting your children into the conversation and helping them understand why, but also tell why they feel the things that they do. Instead of it being a battle of wills, it becomes an opportunity. And I can tell you, that's the hard stuff.
Yeah.
That is slowing yourself down as a parent, slow enough to have the conversations and the relationship and the compassion on your child's feelings, and still having to set strong boundaries is much harder than just setting a rule and saying, because I said so.
Right. You know, and that does, what you're talking about gets into the parenting styles. You know, authoritative, authoritarian, and permissive, is the third one. And, you know, my goodness, I see today the default of parenting, it's permissive.
Yes.
And you want to talk about a child who later on in their early teens and teenage years are truly getting into big stuff, big problems, big troubles. It's the parenting style that is most responsible for that is the permissive, which is, again, it's the easy, that's the, I want to be your friend, I want you to like me, I want you to be my friend. And the way to achieve that is, you know, with young kids is obviously to be their buddy, be the permissive, be the, you know, the cheerleader, constantly like, oh yeah, sure, you can have that, you can go there, you can hang out with those people. because I don't want the conflict in my house, you know?
Right. Right.
So yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That point number
two.
two.
That would be a whole podcast by itself.
Right. Exactly.
Sure.
Exactly. All right. Let's hit this third one here. I'm in control of my child and will protect her from the world.
Yeah. So one of the things that's become part of my every morning sayings is that I control my controllables and leave the rest to God. It's just something I want to remind myself of, that I'm not in control of you. I'm not in control of the people around me. I am in control of me.
Yeah.
So I want to be, number one, in a close relationship with God myself as a parent.
Right.
I want to be solid in my understanding of what I'm responsible for. I want to leave the responsibility to others, my children, my wife, and God, that they're responsible for.
Right.
And so it's an acknowledgement of my child can say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and in their heart hate me,
right,
or not believe it, or they are giving an outward impression that I'm in control, but the reality is there's a whole world going on inside of our children.
Yeah.
And so the word curiosity becomes the most important thing in our culture today, is getting into the heart of your child and being extremely curious about what's going on with them. And what is it that they need to be in control of as they're maturing through their young age? At 2, they want to be in control of whether they can move around the room or not. They say mine, 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 mine insatiably.
Yeah.
At the age of 3, they start saying, I want to feel like I don't have any boundaries, that I can do anything in the world.
Yeah.
And so as a parent, instead of controlling them so much, I can back the boundaries off a little bit and still be in control of their environment while they can explore. So the payoff of all of that, letting me control my controllables and giving children control of their controllables throughout their childhood and then into adolescence and young adulthood, is that they're now prepared to be in control of themselves when they become 18, 19,
Right.
20, 21, as opposed to having to have me tell them what to do or always telling them what they're doing wrong.
Right. Right. So, we hear the term helicopter parent.
Yes.
So that's what's popping in my mind as you're talking.
Let me go a step further. COVID has we've always had helicopter families, lawnmower parents. We've had all of those. What happened during COVID is the helicopter landed on top of the children.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we've moved to a whole nother place. You're not even getting out of the helicopter.
Right.
Get in the helicopter.
Yeah. Is that, thinking about this from a psychological standpoint, and again, this is probably another podcast too, because, you dive into the psychology of parents, mom or dad, who are doing this. There's some stuff going on there maybe with them as far as their own insecurities.
Completely.
And, I think obviously this isn't the time or place to address that, but I know that you speak and you do some other, training and educational pieces around this, but, I don't know if that's something that comes up as part of this discussion or not, as as parents, we're all raised to have our worldviews, and we bring our own baggage into it based on the experiences that we've had and maybe the psychological trauma that we've gone through with bad parents or whatever that spectrum looks like. And, that enters into parenting. And so a lot of times, I think parents that are curious, okay, because and you just said, that's an important aspect of it. Parents that are curious also need to be curious about their own default systems and where those default systems may be harmful to their kids.
Yes.
So having that self-awareness to check and say, are there things that I need to address here that may be impacting my parenting style that could cause long-term damage to my child?
Yes. So one of the things that we see is parenting many times out of fear, fear of my child not becoming what I hope they will.
Yeah.
Fear of my child doing something that causes me not to look like I'm a good parent.
Right.
And so we live out of the fears, and that is a process. It usually takes 3 weeks to recognize it, 3 months to figure out what to do with it, and 3 years to get through it. Yeah. So it is a longer term. It's a coaching type of thing more than a therapy type of thing many times. But the ultimate vision that comes from the scriptures is train up a child in the way that they should go. The vision there of train up comes from actually planting a vine that would produce grapes. The goal is to produce grapes, to train that vine to then be able to be strong, to be able to ultimately hold the grapes, but the vision is that fruit be produced.
Yeah.
And so the vision for a parent would be, what am I doing right now that is feeding the vine of my child's life, that is helping them become strong in the areas where they need to be strong, but ultimately that my child will produce fruit, not so that I will say, look what this great child I created, but for the glory of God.
Yeah.
That ultimately that child's work, what they produce with their life, would draw other people to Christ because of that.
I love that. My brain goes into weird places when people talk. As you're talking, I'm thinking about tomato cages, or the things that rose bushes, the climbing rose bushes, the trellis,
Exactly.
I guess, or whatever it's called. So you've got that structure there that is, it's not completely intrusive, but it's there to offer the support and the guidance that's needed for that tomato plant or rose bush or whatever to.
And then you're surprised by the fruit that comes from it, because you had that structure. You had those, and part of it too is that a child has a certain bent, so you attach those bends to the structure rather than trying to bend the child to the structure.
Yeah.
You bring those personalities. A lot of times parents will say, "This is going on with my child," and I said, "Well, that's going to be God's superpower in their life."
Yeah.
Don't be so consumed that they're struggling with reading.
Right.
Just help them learn to read, because God's going to use whatever it takes during this pruning time, this growing time. He's actually going to use that as their superpower for his kingdom work.
Right. I'll tell you, Jay, just a moment of like transparency and honesty. This is one of the things I really struggled with as a dad, is like my kids' failures. I thought, that's a reflection on me. You got to do better than that. And, when I finally came to the understanding that they're their own person, and they're given strengths and weaknesses for a reason, I think. Right. And it's not about me a lot of times. It's about, being there for my kids despite the things that they're not great at, and also for the things that they excel at. Mm-hmm. That's a hard lesson especially, I don't know if, my wife struggled with it as much as I did, but as a dad, it was a struggle for me. Yeah.
No, I honestly, we all deal with it. And so you talk some in your podcasts about shame, and it's those areas. Women tend to be fearful, men tend to be shameful.
Yeah. And
so it's one of those things that we have to take that to the Lord and continue to be discipled ourselves, so that we're best. In Deuteronomy 6, it talks about, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one God."
Yeah.
And then it talks about, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with your head and your heart and your hands."
Yeah.
And now impress them on your children.
Yeah.
We're really good on impressing things on our children, and not so good about coming back and saying, "Let us be God."
Right.
Not filled up with shame or fear. Let us keep you one God in our life. And that's a challenge for all of us. Thank you for that transparency.
Sure, absolutely. It's interesting that the scripture in Ephesians talks about fathers don't provoke your children to wrath or to anger. And what I noticed, the learning from this, the consequence of me doing just that was, you got to do better. You got to do better. Even though you're not good at that, you got to do better because it's a reflection of me. Really did provoke, especially my oldest one, to be angry, because, I was putting my own insecurities and shame, projecting that onto him. And man, it comes full circle, and you step back from that and you realize everything emerged fine, right? I'm super, super proud of all three of my kids, but in that moment where you don't have the foresight, and know what's going to happen, it's a real thing. So for the dads listening out there, I would say, the piece of advice here would just be to stay true to Scripture and understand that, your own issues are your issues, and you need to be very careful about projecting that onto your kids and forcing them into being something that they're not.
And that's good. You also talk about a lot of isolation.
Yeah,
dads get really isolated, men get isolated, and I think that's key, guys. We got to open ourselves up to have other men before we get so dark that we don't think anybody can come as deep as we are.
Yeah. Well, and to hit on that too, and then we're going to move on, but because you're just keep saying things that are just resonating with me, is going back to the thing about being curious. As surely, I see the college kids and high school kids they isolate, but as moms and dads, we do the same thing with screen time and TV or whatever. And it's hard to be curious about our kids when we're not connecting with them because we're in front of, scrolling through TikTok or whatever, Instagram. And so
Right.
if we're not spending time with our kids, that curiosity, I think, gets covered up with the world.
That's a good word.
Yeah. So, all right. So what's a parenting plan?
a parenting plan. The parenting plan that we have, let's start with that,
Yeah.
is that we just knew that it was going to have to be something that we were able to come back to because life gets so busy and distracted that if we just have the best of intentions of saying we hope we do something, it's never going to happen. So we put together this plan that's in the book to knowing that those times are the times that a child gets off track with the Lord
Right.
at 7, at 11, at 14, 16, 18, 21, and 24. It's like the devil has set up things for
Right.
kids to get off their faith.
Yeah.
And so I see it as a path. I love to go hiking, and it's like sometimes we get off of the path and we end up over in the weeds or the poison ivy, and it's like, oh, where's the path? And so
Right.
we start looking for the signs that get us there.
Yeah.
And so the plan is to get us back on the path. It comes from the concept, let me look it up really quickly, in 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12, where Samuel had been with the Israelite people being attacked. They surely would be destroyed if not for God's intervention. And so in that chapter, literally God just sends some thunder and scares off the Philistines, and it's just this beautiful moment of God showing up.
Right.
And then it says, then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin. He named it Ebenezer. And some of you may have heard the song, I Raised My Ebenezer,
Sure.
and had no idea what it was talking about. It was referring back to this time, I raised this up. And Samuel said, thus far the Lord has helped us. And so the idea of having a plan is that certain times during your child's development, you're actually going to set a day, an event, that you're going to raise an Ebenezer to say to them, thus far the Lord has been with you.
Yeah.
And if the Lord's been with you up to this point, where will he take you from here?
Yeah.
And it's intentionality
Right.
of a parent saying, I'm going to set stop points in my child's life when, and we'll talk about this, when we surround them with mentors, people who are actually going to speak into their life and call out their identity. The thing that's missing in what I see college students right now is they're struggling to figure out what their identity is because it's all over the place.
Yeah.
It's go and figure it out. They're getting different messages. They're looking at social media and telling them what their identity should be, but it doesn't resonate with who they are.
Yeah.
And so there's this constant battle that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so that's what the plan is, to continually call them back to God's identity, what he wants for their life, and surround them with people other than just the parent or even grandparents that are saying that about them. It's hard to walk away from those milestone events where your child has heard from different people that have told them, here's what we see God doing in your life. It's hard for them to walk away and go, I don't know who God is or who I am.
Right.
It's a Ebenezer time in their life.
I really love that so much because it forces us to understand the concept of knowing that our kids, because we forget, as we grow up, we forget that we had these pivotal moments in our life that just seem to be more difficult to navigate than at other times. And I think it has a lot to do with biology. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Satan understands how we're wired, how we're made, and he attacks at specific times. So all of that, I want you to talk a little bit about, because I think this is important for parents to understand a little bit about. Let's talk about the biology for just a second, because you have the brain of a juvenile, of an adolescent that does not fully develop. So they're working, they're working out of their lizard brain, the primitive, the amygdala part, right? And we really don't start to think like rational human beings until we're around age 25, when that prefrontal cortex gets seeded in, right? And those neural pathways get finally concreted. And so I would get so frustrated as a young dad when my kids, they would do just something that was totally idiotic. It's like, what? And I'd say, what were you thinking? And they said, I don't know. And they were being honest. They didn't know, right? So, what's your experience there? Talk a little bit about how all of that, why that's important for us as moms and dads to know.
Yeah, so I won't go into a deep dive. I'll just hit a couple of the high points.
Yeah.
Between 11 and 12, your child is moving, and all this is it's a development. It's not a one day they're this and the next day they're that. It's over a period of time.
Yeah.
Between 11 and 12, typically they're moving from being completely concrete in the way that they're seeing the world into now they understand innuendo, they understand abstract thoughts. They start putting, you can use analogy, and they start understanding how analogy works.
Yeah.
And so during that time period, for us, and we describe this in the book, we actually took them on a global mission trip so that they could see the world different than what their worldview has been. Because up to age 12, basically you're setting all the values of your child. And again, these are rough years, 11, 12, 13.
Yeah.
By that time period, their values are completely set. So we took them on a global mission trip, and we exposed them to a whole nother world of what poverty really looked like, what struggle really looked like, and what love and compassion within those environments really looked like.
Yeah.
And so from that point on, my child, neither one of my boys ever said it's not fair, because that was a development time, and we wanted to work through that period. The other thing that you just brought up about the amygdala, that is a process also. It is the place where our emotions really come from. And so if your child isn't acting a little crazy between 16 and 18, you may want to take them to a psychologist, because that's supposed to be normal, right? Yeah. They're trying to figure it out. But the closer they get to their mid-20s, 24, 25, the front temporal lobe, the blood flow is now going directly. And curiously enough, I found a couple of studies that said that appropriate male touch encourages front temporal lobe blood flow. So if there's a grandfather, a father, whatever it is, go ahead and do the hugging of the 18-year-old boy who wants to stand off, or the girl who says, Dad, leave me. I don't want, that used to be that. It's very needed to get the blood flow and continually loving your kids during that time. So the goal ultimately is to not just run to age 18, but through age 18 to 24, so that you can keep in mind, I'm still helping my child learn to develop their front temporal lobe, that front part of their brain, to regulate their emotions and feelings. Yeah. And so what we find in people, it continues on. Your front temporal lobe learns how to deal with crisis, and typically by the time you're 30, you're making much better decisions than you even did at 24, and by the time you're 40, you become very resilient. You can handle a lot of stress and struggle, and what we want to do is give children an opportunity a little bit younger now to experience struggle and figuring out things for themselves, rather than holding that off and answering all the questions for them and telling them what to do, so that when they do go to college at 18, they already have some resilience built up.
So this goes right back into what you were saying earlier, when we were talking about helicopter parents, because when we do that, we really take away this ability for them to develop these much needed skills later on in life.
100%. It's okay that they lost the soccer game.
Yeah.
It's okay that they're crying about losing the soccer game.
And you said two things too that are both reassuring and terrifying. For moms and dads out there listening, you basically said if your kid's not acting like a total nutcase, 17, 18, that age frame, there's probably something off, because they should be acting. So that's a great relief of like, okay, so my kid's supposed to be crazy at this point. The other thing is, you said the value systems are set in place by the time they're like 12?
12. Yeah, so one of the things I used to say, we were very intentional. Obviously, you can see that in what we're doing, and maybe that was built in shame and fear from me. I don't know. I have to go back and evaluate some of those things. But I started saying to my boys at age 12, guys, I've taught you all. I'm going to teach you all. We're doing is practicing from this point on. And so I would just use that as a mantra, and they can put it back to me. I've taught you all I've teach you. You're just practicing at this point.
Yeah.
But what I was doing is I was putting ownership of their life on them rather than me.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that they reflect on and say, Dad, you really gave us responsibility early, and you believe that we could.
What if parents, because I know from the standpoint of being a dad and looking at, coming to this book, basically when my kid's already grown, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's parents out there that, their kid may be 15, 16, and they're not real happy with the values that child has at this point. Is there hope for a parent to go back and be like, if their value system is already set in place and I've passed that time period, what do I do now? Because I didn't have this book to look at and know that I should have been doing this foundational work way before they were 12 years old.
Yeah, so you do go back and look at what are the values that were set in place early on, and again, that's probably 2 or 3 podcasts. So I'm sorry that we're
you may have to come
so
back.
Many things. The question you ask is there hope? God has made our brains so beautifully in that we can we can make new connections. We can grow. We can develop. We can go through therapy. The foundation of the things that go in, though, are always there.
Yeah.
The cool thing is God uses broken things for beautiful things.
Right.
And so we can begin to pray that way. What I would say, if your child is 14, 15, and 16, there's a power struggle going on, become more curious about what they're feeling and thinking and make that the point of your conversations rather than what you're upset about.
Good, yeah.
There is a place and a time for that, but at this point, your child probably is just pushing against the goads, and they have an unconscious message that mom or dad is just going to tell me no.
Yeah.
And so we have to change that unconscious message to mom or dad are in love with you and want to see you become all that God wants you to be, but we want to understand you.
Yeah.
We want to know what you think and why you think.
Right. That's a good segue into the nitty-gritty of the book, and this is part of the stuff that I really enjoyed reading about. So you develop these terms in your book, utilizes this imagery of a journey. Okay, and basically, this stuff, the things we're going to talk about next, is serve as the backbone, as I see it, of your book, the structure of it. So I'm going to list these out, and then just have you talk through some of them or all of them if you want to. And they're sequentially as you listed them in your book. So journey events, council of travel guides, journey mementos, the journey plaque, letters, journey memory box, and the journey excursion.
Good.
So what are those things? What do you mean by that?
So this is all surrounding getting the kids back on the path for a particular event that you are going to set the Ebenezer for your child. It used to be that many people would do it at age 12. We see that within the Chinese culture. We see it within the Jewish culture. There's other cultures that we see at age 12, calling boys and girls to become adult in those cultures. We don't. We kind of set that at 35 now.
Yeah.
But that is one event that we see. The other one that we see a whole lot is right before a kid leaves home at 18 or when they turn 18, that parents do something like this. Okay. What I find in our culture is that we've got to set a whole lot more of those. We've got to put those events in place as we go to thwart the schemes of the devil. We've got to intentionally put them in place. And so that's the event, is to basically gather people around to tell your child, this is what we see God doing in your life right now, and this is what we believe God is doing in your life. The book walks through exactly how to do that. So we started doing this with our children at 5 and 7. One of the boys who my son wanted to invite to that at 7 was also at his 18.
Oh, wow.
So they were together for over a decade, and they spoke into each other's lives about the importance of Christ. At the age of 12, we had a great event. Again, we then took the boys on a global mission trip. When my older son, Isaiah, was turning 18, he came to me and said, Dad, normally we have 5 to 10 people that come to these events. We sit down and have a meal together. We have an opportunity for them to read the letters. We give them a memento. We have a plaque, and I could show you that plaque.
Yeah, let's see the plaque.
And so in Deuteronomy, it talks about put it on their walls and their doors. So we put the plaque and added each year that they were doing a different milestone. We would put it on the plaque. When we first started, we didn't think it would go all the way to 21 and 24, so I ran out of plaque. But that was what the plaque is. And so at the age of 17, my older son came to me and said, "Dad, I have 35 people I want to invite to this one." Okay. I'm like, "Son, I can't afford that much food. Wow. What are you thinking?" He said, "Just order a pizza or do barbecue, but I really want these 35 people." And he had 35 people on his list that had become significant people that were speaking Jesus into his life. Like, it was not just these random, I want to invite all my friends over. It was mostly adults and then a few of his peers. And he said, "But at the end of it this time, I want to have a few minutes. I want to say a few things." And so at the end of that event, we had all gone through, everybody had read their letter. We asked everybody to read a letter and just tell us what they're seeing God doing in our kids. We had the food. We gave them, I think, a watch that year, just some memento to remember, kind of the Ebenezer. And then my son proceeded to go through all 35 names and tell them where he sees God working in their life.
That is awesome.
You can't plan for that.
Nope.
Like, that's not in the book.
Right. You're getting emotional, too.
Yeah, I can go back to that moment and just see this 18-year-old kid who I can't get to clean up his room or, fill in the blank.
Right.
Taking on a very mature response to seeing God's work in other people's lives.
Yeah.
And, without the plan, we would have never got there.
Yeah.
But we sure didn't plan for that.
Whew, that's powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, as a dad, I can be in that situation and just be moved to the power of what this is actually doing, because this isn't a birthday. He's not. No. This is something that is very spiritually grounded.
Yes, and I've encouraged people, don't do it on your birthday.
Yeah,
find a time, a few weeks after, some other time, that it's just about their spiritual development, putting that Ebenezer in place. Yeah,
and I mean, what an impact that clearly that made on your son. Yeah. Just an incredible story there. You've got some other things. So the Council of Travel Guides. So that's the 35 people.
Yeah,
right?
That's the 35 people. That's not how many normally come. We try to keep it to anywhere from 7 to 10 people. We do a barbecue or some light dinner, and then we just take the time at the event to go around and let each person share what they see. What we find is that there's a theme, and so within every person who's talking, there is a theme that they see God doing, and so that's the travel counselors. And I would describe it as the pegs around a tent on a stormy day. One of those guys in my older son's life is a guy named Brett. When my son has something going on, I'll call Brett and say, "Hey, Brett, this is a Brett conversation, not a dad conversation," because he already knows what I think.
Yeah.
And so those mentors, those travel guides that are in their life, really help create a solid foundation for your child.
Yep.
That's so much more important at certain times than mom and dad are.
I'm so glad you said that, Jay, because moms and dads have a tendency to think I'm not enough, and when other people can speak, usually the same exact thing that you've said or your wife has said, but it's coming from somebody else, it's received completely different, and that's
so different.
That's not a slam against mom and dad doing a bad job. It's human nature. It's the way we're wired to be receptive to certain things, to certain people at certain times. Yeah. And you're also speaking to some intergenerational stuff that is so pivotal. People may ask, why are you talking about parenting? Aren't you focused on college kids? Absolutely, I'm focused on college. That's what this podcast is about. And as moms and dads out there listening to this, you need to understand that what Jay is saying today is imperative as moms and dads, that we use these tools here because that intergenerational thing, all the stuff we've talked about. But, one thing specifically that I'll just throw out there is before kids come to college, while they're at home, while they're in the youth group, whatever it is, that they within the church are having these other people surround them and speak truth into their life that are coming from different generations. I'm sure there's a lot of good psychology behind why that works, but I'll just tell you that, bar none, the kids that I interview and talk to that stick around, not only through college but post college, are the ones that are coming from churches that have intergenerational connections. Mm-hmm. That's their history. That's their background. The ones that don't have that are the ones that leave. They fall away.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Let me speak to that because you brought up the college. We have college students in and out of our house constantly because that's the age our boys are.
Right.
I also work with parents who say they did not go through this process, and you asked that a little bit. And I would say if your child is about to go to college or they're in college, go ahead and put together a plan. And this one's up to 24. I would say go ahead and set it for 31 and say, here's how I'm going to continue to connect with my child between now and 31. Here are some areas of transition that's going to happen in their life, and we're going to celebrate that, and I'm going to pull some people together that I know are going to encourage them and put together a plan. I've even worked with parents who have kids who are in their 40s and 50s who have fallen away from the faith, and they've put together plans that are decade-long plans to be able to speak into them and their children's lives. And we've seen incredible things happen just by simply saying, I'm gonna put these things in my life, these intentional plans in my children's lives, and draw them for as much as it's up to me, for as much as I can control, not controlling them, not shaming them, not building fear in them, but as much as I can control, I'm going to keep calling God's best out in them.
Yeah, and this isn't like you're not advocating for parents that have to go out and dig ditches all day. Doing this stuff is fun. I mean, it's not 100%. Hard work.
It really is. It's just having a plan and doing it.
Yeah, being intentional about it, right? So talk a little bit about the Journey memory box, because we haven't touched on that.
Yeah, so a lot of those things fall into the whole event, but the box is we just have wooden boxes that we put all the letters in. And so our boys have them in their bedrooms. They read through them from time to time. Okay. They put other things in there that they want to remember about their journey. And so it's just a way of keeping up. It's kind of their own personal little here's what God was doing with me at different times according to other people boxes.
I would imagine that talk about the difference of girls and boys. You don't have a girl, but I'm thinking about this and how meaningful this would be, especially with daughters, to have these types of things. It absolutely, apparently, has resonated with your boys, but I'm just thinking, the difference between my two boys and my daughter, it's like Jupiter and Mars.
Right,
it's so different, but this stuff I think would resonate especially with daughters to have these kind of things.
We've been fortunate enough to see many families adopt this. We describe it. We don't prescribe it, which means we don't tell you you've got to do it exactly this way. We just describe what we did, and we've had an opportunity to speak to lots and lots of families, and so we are walking with lots of families doing it. Yeah. And the creativity that comes out from this for parents who have daughters kind of makes me jealous. I never had daughters.
Yeah, they're special.
Yeah.
I give my daughter a hard time, but I love her dearly. But they are different to raise than boys, very different. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap things up here. This last question I wanted to ask you, in light of everything we've talked about, what are you seeing in the church as you survey the ability of Christian parents to navigate the raising of their children in today's society? Overall good, or are many parents missing something important?
Yeah, I think that we are underestimating the plan that our culture and society has to disciple our children. We're underestimating that external, and we are so busy that we don't think we have the time to do discipleship. Yeah. That's one of the things that I do here when I do parent conference is how do I work this in? What's the plan? I think for the church, what we probably need to focus on right now is equipping parents to disciple their children. The way that I describe it oftentimes is we tell parents, you need to be discipling your children, and they look at you and say, well, I wasn't discipled. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, good point.
And then we say, well, you should be doing it. And so it's kind of like a person broken down on the side of the road in a car and you telling them, fix your own engine.
Right.
And so I think that we as a church need to, one, become really equipped in how to help parents put together plans, disciple their children. What are the important conversations? It's not just showing up on Sunday and doing Sunday school or showing up with your youth for youth group or sending a text. There's a process and a plan, and first the church knowing what that is and how to help parents, and then intentionally giving it to them.
Yeah.
Encouragement.
Yeah.
Shame and fear are probably going to be less helpful. Encouragement, and that means holding hands with people until they get it and can pass it on.
Yeah.
And so what we're seeing is that now we're seeing second generation of people who have gone through it telling other people to go through it.
Right.
And they're equipped and they're empowered and they've got the tools that they need to be successful.
I don't think that that's even on the radar screen of most churches, honestly.
Agreed.
I really, from what I've seen, and I talk to college students who represent a large part of the Southeast United States. They're coming from all different churches, and it's very, very rare that I talk to a student that is coming from a church who has identified. But just honestly speaking here, the first discipling that a kid needs to see should be coming from mom and dad, right? I mean, it shouldn't be coming from somebody else.
Absolutely, yeah.
And obviously, if mom and dad don't know what that looks like, haven't been exposed to it themselves, don't have the resources that push this intentionally, saying, "Mom and Dad, you are your child's first disciple. It is up to you to disciple your kids." Okay, because I'm speaking from personal testimony here. I mean, when I was a young parent, I just figured that was the youth minister's job. That's what they were there for. That's what we hired. That's what the church hired them for. And a good thing too, because they know a lot more about it than I do. I'm going to screw my kids up if I get a hold of them,
Sure.
right? And so now on the other end of that, seeing that and seeing just the complete devastation of our kids and they're exiting the faith because they didn't have that in the home. It's just not there.
Yeah.
What a great thing for churches to identify and hone in on and say, this needs to be part of our vision going forward, that we're going to equip the saints. We're going to teach moms and dads how to disciple their kids, what that looks like.
Yeah.
So,
and this is just my bias. That needs to be our number one priority above every other priority in the church. And where I am spoiled is that the pastor of my church, Bobby Harrington, beats this drum. And so it's easy for me because it's coming from the senior pastor.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the things that I would say. The other thing I would say to parents is don't lose hope. Put together something like the milestone events where you've got to and through it with your kids to lead them through. But there's also a tool that we've just put out from renew.org that's called Real Life Theology Conversations. And it's 52 conversations for parents to have with their kids about faith issues that deal with the head, the heart, and the hands.
Okay.
And that is, again, a description. If you don't have something else, I recommend it, but there's other things out there that will give you the tools. Even if you sit down with your kids one time a week and really lead them through a discussion about Jesus and what it means to be in a relationship with him, and give them some real tools, and then talk about it the rest of the week.
Okay, so
that's a start.
What's the name of that again? Can you say that again?
Real Life Theology Conversations.
Real Life Theology Conversations. Okay, and where can we find that?
You can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
But also renew.org.
Okay.
At Real Life Theology Conversation, RLC SC. So the Real Life Theology Conversations.
Okay.
And again, that's a description, not a prescription.
Gotcha. Okay, great. I like to have our guests close out with final thoughts on their a verse, a Bible verse that resonates with you. You've got a Bible there if you want to use it. Yeah. And so, Jay, this has been just an incredible conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming here today and sitting down and speaking with us. We've uncovered a lot of stuff that is very intriguing that I may actually like to have you back and uncover some other stuff.
I am the things that I'm wanting to do with my life going forward is I want to make sure I love my wife really well. That's number one.
That's important. It's important.
That's the one that God has given me to focus on. The kids are almost grown. That's my focus. The second thing is to help churches know how to help parents, and then help parents, and then model that as a practitioner. I never want to be away from a church myself.
Yeah, it's needed.
So that's needed. So the Bible verse, 1 Peter 5:8, it's the one that God gave me many, many years ago. Be sober, be vigilant, because the devil walks around like a roaring lion, seeking out someone to devour.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's gotten really good at it.
Yeah, he has.
Resist him. Stand firm in your faith, because other brothers and sisters around the world are going through the same devil trying to mess their lives up too.
Yep.
So let's partner arm in arm, stand together, and roar like lions.
Absolutely. Great advice, Jay. Thanks again for being here. Hey, give us feedback, subscribe, share this podcast, get the word out to people. They need to hear stuff like this. They're inundated with a lot of stuff they don't need to look at and they don't need to listen. I am proud of this podcast. I'm proud of the people that we have on and the message that's being put out there. So share it with other people so that they can hear the good news also. Until our next podcast of The Lion, the Way, and the War, love one another, be kind to one another, and remember the Creator of the universe loved you so much that he gave up his only Son for you. Have a blessed day, everybody.